Well, good afternoon. I'm Bill Anderson, and I'm coming live from the Costa del Sol, which has not really been living up to its name over the last week. We've had a pretty solid week of rain, but I think it was necessary. I'm delighted to welcome my guest today, Chris Kidd. Chris, welcome.
Hello, how are you, Bill?
I am well. Chris, don't you just love it? Because you're actually not very far away from me at the moment. You're just down the road, basically. Don't you just love it when it's colder indoors than it is outdoors down here?
Absolutely. It's interesting, especially when I think the houses are built for the warm weather. So as soon as we get these type of cold weather stints, it's particularly jarring, shall we say?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, we're kind of fortunate that we live out in the countryside, so it's very easy for us just to nip outside and warm up, even if it's raining, you know?
Absolutely.
Chris, we're going to be talking about really all things social media today. And you have your own company down here, but I know you operate all around the world, Spark Media. But first of all, I discovered that we're kind of neighbours, aren't we, in more ways than one, because we both come from the same city.
Do we? Oh yes, Edinburgh. You're from Edinburgh as well. That's right.
Yeah,
I'm a Leither originally. I was born in Leith Hospital. I think it was Leith Hospital when it was still there. It's no
but
longer there anymore. So
right.
yes, we are neighbours here and we're neighbours there.
Yeah. I think I probably left Edinburgh before you were born, but never mind that. Chris, why the Costa del Sol, and how did you end up here? What was the sort of precedence that happened?
Yeah, well, we actually originally, my partner and I always had a plan to move to Spain. Originally, the idea had actually been to move to one of the islands, but we came during on holiday actually to Torremolinos and Benalmádena area, and we really really liked it, and we realised that obviously it was still had obviously that Spanish feel that we wanted, but it was
Yeah,
less dependent on seasons, etc. And it was still mainland, so it was much easier to get anywhere. And essentially, the driving factor that got us here when it did was the referendum and the Brexit vote, because obviously if we'd
right.
waited, we wouldn't have been able to do so. So it hadn't actually been in our plans to come as quickly as we did. If we had been going by our original plan, we still would have had another year or so before we moved over. But we've now been here for over 3 years.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people actually, Chris, took the plunge when they knew that the barriers were coming up. When Brexit really sort of was going to bite, and just decided, well, it's now or never. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's literally the language that we used, and it was within the space of, I think it was within the space of 3 months from the vote to leave that were living here.
Right.
We just went straight for it. But I've always my entire life been self-employed, so it was a relatively straightforward decision to make and a process to undertake as well.
Yeah, but also, Chris, I think it's reasonable to say that in the line of work that you have been self-employed, which is in the whole world of social media, it's probably less critical about where you are in terms of doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is one of those. It depends on what you do in social media, but the overarching business as a whole, yeah, you can essentially do from anywhere. It wouldn't matter if I was here, if I was in the Asias, in the Americas. It wouldn't really make any difference
Yeah,
for the majority of what I do. Some of my clients, obviously, we do photography, videography, and actual on-site content creation for them as
right.
part of what they pay for. So for those types of clients, that's not so possible. But then you just have a different client base. I mean, we do have clients in Ireland, in the UK, throughout Europe, and they provide the content for us to use. So we give them a list essentially of what we need, and they do it themselves and then send it over, and we do all the magic with it this end.
Yeah, I was watching the other day, Chris, a video that you made of the Paloma Park in Benalmádena.
Ah,
Uh,
was that on YouTube?
yes, it was on YouTube.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very nice, and very nicely pulled together, and I think gives a lovely sort of atmospheric feeling about what the park is. I mean, I know the park pretty well. I haven't been there for a while, I have to say, but it's you really kind of capture the bits that people maybe don't notice, but when they're going there.
Absolutely, such a big, vast, expansive area that people know the main stuff. They
Yes,
know about the head statues and all the rest of it. But there's so many. Every time we go, we find another corner that's got something really interesting. Actually, until I created that video, I didn't know that there was a cactus statue up by the library. I had no idea that
right.
was there. I'd never seen it before. So it's one of those gifts that keeps giving, as they
Yeah.
say.
And for those that don't really know, I mean, Ben Almadena, or as many Brits would say, Ben Almadena,
Yes.
is really right on the coast, and it's probably known as a fairly touristy area, because there are a lot of hotels and whatever, but there's a lot of Brits live there permanently as well, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a large British community here, from all nations of the UK, and yeah, it's. I mean, obviously the what's called Benalmádena Costa, which is the portion of Benalmádena that's beside the seafront. That's
Yes,
obviously exceptionally touristy. There's a lot of that is built up around tourist shops, restaurants, hotels, and all of that sort of thing. But when you move up to more Arroyo de la Miel in the town. It's that is not seasonal at all.
yes,
That's a township. It's an area where Spanish people live, Dutch, German, French, UK. So
yeah,
there's people here all year round. It's not many people do mistaken it for a holiday resort, but it's
sure.
not. It's a small city essentially. And then of course you've got Pueblo, which is the more Spanish village, which is
Yeah,
absolutely stunning. And some of the views from there across the coast are incredible.
it is beautiful up in the
Yeah.
Pueblo. And it's interesting, a lot of Spanish towns or municipalities actually sprouted up from an original village, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Yeah.
And whether it's Mijas Pueblo or Benalmádena Pueblo, the Pueblo part really is just the village, and
Exactly.
it's the kind of origins of these places, and well, Benalmádena is really an Arab name, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a quite a few different theories about how the name came about, but yeah,
Right,
it's the most common held belief is that it's Arabic for son of. Now I'm going to get this wrong, but son of miners or son of mining, something along
right.
those lines, because they believe obviously that Benalmádena um, really took off around the mines that set up by the Pueblo. It's iron and ore. I believe that they mined
All right.
there right as far back as the 15th century, if I remember right.
But that sounds about right, but because
Yeah,
the Ben is usually son of, and Al is the real kind of hint that the name is is of Arabic origin. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, but we have a blog about that actually speaks about the different thoughts behind the name and what the names
right,
actually, different variations of the names actually mean. Because we have two businesses. We have Spark Media, which is the social media business, which we're speaking about primarily today. But we also have business that's called Simply Ben Omadna, which is a new business, which
right.
is much more about the town of Ben Omadna, its people. We have obviously the YouTube channel, the podcast, the blog. We have a magazine that's coming out in the new year, and we have a website directory and events calendar for all sorts of businesses and local things that happen in Benomadna. So we have this. My Benomadna knowledge doesn't primarily come from my social media activities, but actually more the
Yes.
activities I do on that side of my other business.
But I think it is nice when you go and settle down in an area, to learn a little bit about the history of it, and not just sort of turn up like a tourist looking for the beach and the sangria, you know?
exactly. And perhaps learn a little bit of the language as well might be a good start for people.
How are you doing with that, Chris? How are your language skills?
Great. Well, I already speak French.
Right,
I was quite a fan of French when I was in high school, and then when I went to college, I had a friend who was Swiss French, so I spoke to her one day a week in French. And then I moved to Paris as part of my earlier career. So yeah, my French is or was quite good. I've not actually had anyone to speak it with for about a decade now, so
right.
it's a bit rusty, but it's okay. I So my Spanish is actually getting there quite fast. I didn't speak any before we moved over here. Now we really only watch kind of Spanish programming on Netflix and stuff to improve our
Yeah.
language skills. But so it's getting there. It's getting there. I'm quite confident with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my wife is Spanish, and
Right.
she doesn't speak French, she doesn't speak Italian, but when she's hearing people speaking in those languages, she can identify the likenesses in the words that maybe I can't with my ear.
Yeah.
And you know, we had some French friends who were here for a while, and you know, they didn't speak any English, so we were kind of between. Oh, they speak very little English, between English and Spanish and French, and Vicky picked up an awful lot
Yeah.
of the French just by being a native Spanish speaker.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the Latin languages on the continental Europe, Latin languages are really fundamentally similar. You know, the Spanish, the Italian, and the French. A lot of the verbs themselves actually sound very similar.
Yes,
You know, je peux, I can. Puedes, you know, they're all very, very similar. And the conjugation structure as well in English, it's completely different, but in the Latin continental European languages, they're very similar in their how they structure their verb usage. So
yeah.
yes, once you've got one, it's much easier to kind of learn and conquer the others.
Yeah, but because the thing is breaking away from the sort of typical English structures. And I mean, Spanish verbs are honestly, they're a bloody nightmare. But there are just so many different forms, you know. But
Yeah,
you know, I think as you say, if you've already broken away from the sort of really relatively simple English structures, and you've
yeah,
got that in your head already, then I think it does make it easier to sort of receive new messages
absolutely.
about how these things work. Yeah, and you know, you're probably quite unusual because you haven't been down here all that long. And you decided for whatever reasons, you know, I need to learn Spanish, and
Yeah.
you must know so many people sort of round and about who've been here for 20 or 30 years, and still struggle with more than saying, you know, una cerveza or un café con leche.
Absolutely, yeah. It's tricky, slightly irritating at times, but yeah, you do. We have friends that have been here. I have one friend who's been here 25 years and has very little Spanish, very little comprehension of Spanish, which I think
Yeah,
is I struggle with. But then again, I suppose I have to also look at it from the side of the coin that I already have knowledge of another language, but
yeah,
so I have to be fair to people, and some people aren't linguists. Some people find it particularly difficult to learn
yeah,
languages. My partner is one of them. He struggles learning languages much more than I do. So I also have to be aware that I sit
yes,
in a very different headspace because you know I have a linguist brain. I traveled a lot when I was in my initial career, so I've been to the Americas, Brazil. I spent some time in Brazil. I've lived in Portugal and Belgium, Germany, Holland. So I've been
right.
exposed to languages a lot in my younger adulthood, and as someone with a linguistic thinking brain, you know it becomes much easier. So I
Sure.
can't really be too angry at people that don't pick languages up as well as I do.
Well, just for your information, we have a lot of listeners coming from Brazil today.
Wonderful.
So,
Hey.
I don't know how your Portuguese is. You want to welcome them?
Uh, no, I don't. Well, I want to welcome them, obviously, but not in Portuguese.
Not in
It's a
Portuguese.
while. I was in Portugal. I was in Brazil in 2004, and I was in Portugal, and I think it was 2006.
Right, right.
So it's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah. Okay,
And
we'll let you off with that one then,
thank
Chris.
you.
Chris, you've obviously done a number of different things professionally,
Yeah.
and you've kind of settled down, over the last 10 years or so into the whole area of social media. How did that come about?
Yeah, originally I was doing it alongside my other career. So at that time I was in education. I was working with a lot of educational environments. I was working in a lot of educational environments. So I was helping people um, to extend learning through their digital presence as part of what I
Right,
was doing within my wider remit, as it were. So that kind of it just became something that I was constantly involved with. Um, so to give people the accurate information, obviously you have to undertake more learning. So over the period of time, I just learned more and more and more. And then let me think, uh, when we started, we had an art company for a while that we were involved with, and that was we were working with a lot of local artists that were trying to get their work
right,
seen in the wider field. So I did obviously a lot of work then with social media to get words out there, and that was primarily at that time. It was primarily on Facebook and that side of social media. And when it came to moving here, I worked with a number of environments where I could see that in in this area, it's something that really could help businesses extend their reach and extend how people perceive them as well, and to get their actual message out, whether they were a service-based business or otherwise. So I just kind of took the leap and said, I'm going to start my own. I have enough knowledge for this. I'm going to start my own media agency, and so I
right,
did.
right. Yeah, so
And
it
that's about 3 years that's been running now.
So it just seemed like the right opening, the right opportunity, given your current circumstances down here on the south of Spain. And have you found a lot of interest? And I'm thinking locally first of all, in people using a media company like yourselves to get themselves out there.
Yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I think with regards to the digital side of things in Spain, particularly, it's Spain's a little bit behind from a technological standpoint. It's not utilizing platforms in the way that you find other countries using the platforms. Um, so the way that people here are used to disseminating information is very different.
Yeah,
So there's been a little bit of resistance in that aspect, and also from the point of view of companies here, there is resistance with regards to paying someone to run social media, because many people
yeah,
see social media for business as the exact same as social media for the personal life. So
right,
when they have maybe 2,000, 3,000 friends on their personal Facebook page, they're like, oh, that's fine, that's great. I put out a post on my personal page, it gets hundreds of likes, so therefore I can do it for my business myself. It's absolutely no bother. And what they don't seem to realize is obviously there is a much it's a completely different beast ultimately. So it swings and roundabouts. But the people that have utilized a company for digital advertising and social media specifically have seen the benefit, and when they do see that benefit, then the realization comes.
Yeah, and what I feel about social media, Chris, is this. I mean, sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate it, but I would struggle to do even my work without it. That is the reality. But we're kind of inundated with stuff, and at the moment, we'll talk about other forums, but at the moment, I'm thinking about Facebook. You know,
Sure.
to the point where I'll say to my wife something. Oh, I saw something this morning. Let me show you it. And I can't find it again. Because when you look down the feed, there's hundreds of things just coming in and coming in and coming in, and maybe that's good for some people. But there's nothing that makes most of these posts actually stand out in any way. It's just yet another one and yet another one and yet another one. And well, it's free.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Facebook has become a little bit of a victim of its own success ultimately. What we have to remember, I mean, from a business perspective, what we have to remember is that social media is a company. It's a profit making business. And I
Sure.
think a lot of people do, when they're utilizing it, whether it's for personal reasons or for business reasons, they do forget that. So the platforms are doing what is in their own best interests. And when we're using social media for business, we have to find a way to work with the platform to get ourselves seen and get ourselves noticed. So there are a lot of techniques and tactics that have to be utilized to be able to make sure that your business gets the best out of social media. And what the problem is with something like Facebook, particularly, is people are still posting in the way that they've always posted.
Right.
So whether it's the way that they've always posted on their personal page, they just transfer that to the business page, or the way that they previously posted for the business maybe three, maybe even 2 years ago, they're still producing that same content. But the world of social media has moved on so fast
Right.
that people are not seeing the same return for their time investment and then are just getting frustrated. And what we see, instead of people accessing ways and means to learn how to create new types of content, they will just blame the platform, or they will blame their followers. There's a blame game that I guess happens in everything in life. So
Yeah.
people don't really understand why they're seeing more content that's irrelevant, or why their posts are not getting seen by as many people as they used to. And it's a weekly battle at the moment. There was a period of time just 3 months ago where Instagram were introducing a raft of changes literally daily, to
Right.
the point that even those of us that are in the industry cannot keep up. So it's a it's definitely a trick. But yeah, we are over we are overexposed to so much content now that I think for a lot of people it's almost traumatic.
Well, it can be, and
Yeah,
what I think I've noticed, and you can tell me whether you think this is a good thing or a bad thing, is that people get a post, and it might be simple. It might be a poster advertising a special lunch or an event, and they just flood every page they can find
yeah,
with the same thing. And I go through my feed, and it's like, oh, it's the same one again, the same one again, the same one again. And actually, after I've clicked on two, I don't even bother with the other ones, uh, because people have this idea that flooding Facebook, for example, with the same post is actually going to be more effective.
yeah. And this is one of the major problems we have with smaller businesses who are newer to utilizing a company to run their social media. People have become um, con- uh, have somehow, I don't know where this happened, but somehow people have gained the understanding that social media is a notice board for business, and fundamentally it's not. So, I don't want to get too technical, but everyone's heard the word algorithm before. So
Yeah,
the algorithms, and there's not just one, there are multiple for every single social media platforms,
right,
depending on what thing it's dealing with. But the algorithms, if you put out a post, for example, the platform will only show that to a very, very, very small number of your followers.
right,
And what the platform is doing, the algorithm for that part of the platform is testing your content to see if your content is quality. So dependent on what reaction that gets, it will then display your content to a slightly wider amount of your audience. And it will go through this process again and again and again for almost a 24-hour period, and then continually on for the longevity of the post, which is different for every platform.
Sure.
Um, so what happens is a business, for example, say you're taking a theatre that needs bookings, or a live music venue that needs bookings. They'll on the morning say, oh, I don't have enough bookings for tonight. So what they'll do is they'll put this post together and they'll shove it out saying bookings for tonight, and then get frustrated that nobody is seeing their post. But because the post hasn't been tested by the platform, they actually don't get notified. The majority of their followers don't get notified that that post is out there until at least the following day. So
Right.
this is something that we come up with a lot of the time. And then when people don't see that they're getting the reaction they want, the result or their response is to, well, I will flood social media myself. But then that has a human psychology element to it as well, whereby if people do happen to see it a lot, then they'll disengage from not only the post but also the brand.
Right.
And a lot of modern days, a lot of modern day social media is to do with human psychology ultimately. But at the same time, flooding social media on the other side of the coin isn't necessarily a bad idea either, because it's very unlikely that the platform's algorithms for the groups will show that to the same people, because the algorithms work in the same way for groups. So if somebody creates that post, puts it out, and then puts it into a group, it's not going to show it to all of the group. It's going to show it to a certain subsection of the group and
All
see what
right.
the
Okay.
response is, and then show it to more, and then show it to more, and then show it to more. And that will be the same for every group that they post in. So it's very unlikely that the general audience will always see that post. But if you are like yourself and having to post in those groups for your business, then your algorithm, or the algorithm that speaks to your profile, will show you everything that's coming up in those groups, and
Right.
therefore you see all of those posts because you are more active in those groups as a result of what you use them for. So, but
Right.
there's another person that's maybe sitting next to you who will never see that post in those groups, even though they're in all the same groups.
Ah, right. Okay. Listen, Chris, we're going to take a short break
Sure.
just now, and when we come back, I've got some other questions for you, and we'll
Yeah.
move away maybe from Facebook into some of
Sure.
the other sides, and also maybe we'll get into some of the biggest errors that people make in using social media. Dave,
Absolutely.
it's over to you. Welcome back. I'm Bill Anderson, coming live from the Costa del Sol, a rather kind of cloudy and grey day, I have to say, today. And delighted to welcome back my guest today, Chris Kidd. Welcome back, Chris,
Hello. Thank you
Spark
for having me.
from Spark Media, and we're talking all things social media. We've kind of focused a bit, Chris, on Facebook, because I think it's probably one of the areas that most people are most familiar with. But what other sort of branches of social media do you get yourself involved in?
So, I mean, essentially, we cover everything. So, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Reddit, we cover the whole spectrum, and it really depends on the business, and who their demographic is, who their target audience is, will depend then on what we recommend they use as a platform. Each platform has its own kind of primary demographic, and not every platform works for every business. And I know we're going to come on to mistakes that some businesses make later, but that's one of the first things everyone says, well, I have to be on Facebook. And that's not true. If your demographic is say your 18 to 25-year-olds, and that's probably the last place you want to be as a business, because they are simply not on that platform anymore. They may have an account, but they're not actually utilizing that platform actively. So yeah, there's a whole range of them, and more cropping up every day. There's a big insurgence at the moment of uses with a platform called Mastodon, and some others. So yeah, it just depends.
Right.
But we do them all.
I think that's an interesting thing because, Facebook, let's just say, I don't know, 10 years ago, what was, like the in thing. And I guess for most of us that have got stuck into Facebook or stuck on Facebook, we haven't really realized that there is a whole new generation of, I don't know, social media geeks who are going, that's for oldies. Facebook is for oldies.
Yes, yeah, and that is kind of the narrative as well.
Really? So,
Yeah,
so, so,
unfortunately.
really, for people like me, I know how to use social media, but I don't know that much about it. It may well be that I'm not using the best social platform for getting my
Absolutely.
messages out.
Yeah, absolutely. It really depends on. I mean, when we, as a media company, that's actually the first thing that we cover with our clients before we even touch their platforms. We do what's called story branding. So we look at their business, we look at the targets that they want to achieve with their business. We look at who their demographic is, what their message is, and those type of things. And then we come up with strategic plans for both their content, the wider marketing message, paid advertising, all of those sort of things. And from that, we will then come up with a strategic plan for social media, which will involve which platforms we feel they need to focus on. So, for example, at the moment, for example, we have a new client in Ireland. We're currently growing their new restaurant, and their demographic sits quite comfortably on Instagram. Um, and we have seen astronomical growth since starting that platform only a couple of months ago for them. But that's because that's where their audience sits.
Right.
Now, they also have a presence on Facebook because they have a slightly older demographic. And that has kind of married those two platforms together, have married really well for the marketing. And as a result, the restaurant has been full. And we are actually their only form of outward marketing. Whereas, if we're going to market, we have another client that's a nightlife environment, so we market for them primarily on Instagram and TikTok, because that's where their
Right.
demographic sits.
Right.
But what we do need to highlight as well is it's not just the platforms that are different; it's the actual content that goes on those platforms. So you could have the exact same message that you want to put out on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn, but how you would present that information is vastly different.
Yeah, and let's be honest, not many people have that kind of skill set to be able to think about, well, I'll do this on Instagram and that on Facebook and whatever,
Yeah.
apart from the fact that it's all time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is all time, and especially when you're dealing with when you start Facebook from a content creation point of view is actually relatively straightforward. There are ways to get better engagement. So, for example, the platform pushes video more than it does any other type of content, so video works better. But creating that video content is actually relatively straightforward. Whereas when you start to move into the likes of the new Instagram, we'll call it, which is no longer photo sharing. It's trying to rival YouTube and TikTok. And when you speak about TikTok or YouTube Shorts, the way that that content has to be created and provided to the audience is completely different. It's much more, it looks a lot less glossy at the same time as being very specifically planned and strategically done. So it does
Right.
take a lot of it takes a lot of knowledge of human psychology to understand how to engage with the people that are watching this video and how to get them to keep watching, because of course our attention spans are so much shorter as a civilization now, because I believe of the vast growth of social media. But also we have to learn how to keep people interested, and engage them in the first instance
Sure.
so they even watch the video. Just out of a point of interest, the standard watch time of a social media video is only 7 seconds.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if you don't capture the person's attention in the first 1 to 2 seconds, they will scroll past. If you manage to capture their attention in the first 1 to 2 seconds, but don't keep them engaged and interested up to that 7 second point, then you've lost them already, and they may be your ideal customer. So I think from a business point of view, people don't really realize how little time you've got to make the impression that you need to make.
So do you think that we've always only had the attention span of a goldfish, or do you think that social media has actually made this problem worse?
Okay, look, I wouldn't blame it entirely on social media, but I don't think it's helped,
Right.
if I'm being honest. We have a 24-hour news cycle now. We have, there's progressively over the past couple of decades, there has been an increase in, advertised-driven marketing, content-driven marketing, and that's not just in social media. Social media has maybe highlighted it more, but it's been happening for a long period of time, particularly in the press media. So you can see that press is. Some press environments, their product is very advertising heavy, and as such, they have to get a lot of information to keep their readers interested into much shorter spaces, much smaller column inches. So I don't
Right.
think it's necessarily just social media, but yeah, I don't think it's helped. And from a video point of view, yeah, definitely social media has had an impact, particularly platforms like TikTok, because it is flash, quick, easily digestible content. It's speedy entertainment, and we can see that that's transferred across to other types of entertainment. When you're looking at Netflix American TV drama series, for example, they used to be 26 episodes in a season. They're now down to 10. The episodes used to be an hour long. Some of them are now only 20 minutes. So we can see
Right.
that that's actually something that's happening holistically across how we digest content everywhere. Um,
Right. So,
so
you maybe partially answered this question, Chris, but I am interested in, and you see this all the time. You go and on YouTube, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you're doing that. We don't even know how to sleep anymore. You're sleeping the wrong way. You're making your coffee the wrong way. But what are the kind of errors that people are making? So maybe you've touched on this already.
I think the primary, if I can pick the first primary one, it's that people aren't making content for their audience.
Right.
Ultimately, social media now is an entertainment platform, whichever platform you're using. So, as I said, kind of briefly earlier on, people are putting out posts, or maybe putting out a poster, and people don't want to see that. If they are looking to be entertained while they're scrolling, then if they pass a poster that's full of writing and graphics and all the rest of it, that's not entertaining for them. So they're just going to keep scrolling. So I think what businesses need to really start to focus on primarily is their audience. What do their audience want to see? It's the what
Right.
if question. What if I was looking for my business's services? What would I want to see? And that's why businesses, I think, find it difficult to adequately market themselves on social media, because they know what they want to show people, but that's
Yeah.
not necessarily what people want to see. So that is the biggest mistake that businesses make, is selling what they want to sell and not giving the audience what they want to receive. And the other thing is, I mentioned in it there, is selling. Nobody wants to be sold to. None of us want to scroll on social media and have people say buy, 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 buy.
Right.
Selling actually for a business on social media should be a secondary product of good content. If you have good quality content that focuses on your audience, the audience will come back to your feed over and over again for that quality content. And as a result, when they need whatever you're offering, they will remember you. Um,
Right.
the other issue that businesses have is, again, they're treating it much like it used to be, or how it is for famous people, or how it is for their personal Facebook. If a business puts out a post, for example, that they've worked really hard on, and it only gets 10 likes, then they're devastated. They're absolutely devastated, but they're looking at the wrong thing.
Right.
That post may have only got 10 likes, but it may have reached 10,000 people. It may have been seen by 10,000 of their ideal audience, whereas a post can get 1,000 likes, but only have been seen by 1,000 people. And those 1,000 people may not be their target audience, or may not even live in the area where they're selling the product. So
Right.
businesses look at the wrong thing, or people. It's not the business's problem, it's how people think, because of the way we've been fed social media over the past decade. It's not about likes, it's not about vanity, it's about exposure. This is all about brand awareness, the same as any type of marketing. So you
Yeah.
want to be seen by the most appropriate people, the people that are going to buy your product, the most you can.
Yeah.
And people need to see your brand 10 times to even remember it. So it's about exposure, it's about getting out there. So it's not about the likes. We have plenty of feeds that we run for people that don't actually get any likes on their post, but when you look at the actual background information, they're being seen by tens of thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands of people, who then do become customers of their business.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can get a bit obsessed about how many little ticks or likes or loves or whatever we get on our posts, and I
Yeah,
certainly can identify. I'm generally more interested in two things. One is the reach that it's got,
yeah,
as you say, and I tend to focus very much on a small area, so I'm not expecting 30,000, 40,000 reach, but the other thing is the engagement. When people start to write comments, and I think sometimes when people start to write comments, they forget to go back and put a reaction onto the post.
yeah.
But I like when people start commenting, because it's like, okay,
Yeah.
now people are engaging with it rather than just ticking a box.
Sure, but also engagement is a whole raft of other things. So in your engagement metrics, there are other things that people do. People may share the post more, which is actually
Sure.
great for your reach, but they may not like it or comment on it. People will
Yes.
in your engagement, it includes how many people have watched over 3 seconds of your video, or how many people have paused on it, how many people have clicked on it to look at it bigger. Like in your engagement, there are so many things that your audience can be doing as a result of your post that you don't know about,
Right.
if you're not looking at your metrics. And those things have a positive impact on your business. So
Mm.
again, people are saying, well, nobody's liked it, nobody's commented it, must be rubbish. And it's like, well, you look at the background and actually the post has outperformed every other post that
Right.
they've ever put out.
Right.
It's reached more people. There's actually been more engagement. And engagement on social media currently is very, very difficult. The average engagement rate on Facebook, for example, is only 2 to 3%. The average engagement on Instagram is only 1.5 to 2%.
Right.
Like the engagement rates on these platforms are tiny. So if you are running your social media well and improving that engagement rate, then you are already outperforming the majority of businesses that are your competition.
Right.
We, like, as an agency, and this is probably a really good point for comparison. If somebody is running their own business and they're only getting the standard engagement rate of 2 to 3%, or 1.5 to 2% on Instagram, as an agency, our clients get 20% as standard
Right.
engagement rate. So you can see that massive jump, and that's because, again, the content resonates. We know what we're targeting specifically with every
Right.
post,
Yeah.
and we know how to do engagement tactics. We know how to do engagement strategies that get the results. And again, people don't plan what they want their posts to do. I want to sell this. I want to sell this hairspray. But what do you want the post to do? Do you want people to share it to get seen by new people, or do you want to get people to engage on it to start a discussion about this
Yes.
new product? Because you can't, social media posts for business cannot be everything to everyone. So you
Right.
really have to think every single thing. What is the purpose of this, and how do I get that seen in the way that I need it seen, and get the reaction that I actually want this post
Sure.
to
Sure.
to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, targeting hairspray on myself and Dave really wouldn't go very far. I don't think we've got a single hair on our head between us. Um,
um, yeah, it's a tricky one, and again, there are structures for posts as well, which obviously a lot of people um, don't realize. There are ways that you put your post together to get the best reaction that you intend, but also people forget that people buy people, and that's never changed. Again, it's a bit more about human psychology here, but people buy people. They don't want to see the business a lot of the time. They want to see the people behind the business. A lot of my content focuses on storytelling, and a lot of my teaching. I use my Instagram platform to teach people how to do this stuff.
right.
And it focuses on tell the story,
Mhm.
show the people, give the experience, rather than flooding it with stuff that no one wants to see.
Right. Okay. Clickbait. We hear a lot about this. Is it a good thing or a
Yeah.
bad thing, or sometimes yes, sometimes no?
Yeah, clickbait itself, from both a personal and professional belief, is bad. I hate it. I think it's the worst marketing tactic out there,
Right.
and there are a great deal of many others that are bad, like follow, unfollow, and all of these sort of things that I don't recommend. But with clickbait, there's a very, very clear difference. You need to hook your audience in. And that's what we call the hook, in social media and marketing in general.
Sure.
And then there's clickbait. And one is you saying something that is going to entice people, interest them, or make them look at your content. The other clickbait is when you put something sensationalist that isn't necessarily true or that
Yes.
won't actually appear in the content that you're sharing. So, yes, you should hook people in, but you should never clickbait them. You should never bait them into looking at content with something that's irrelevant or just an outright lie. So,
Yeah.
hook them, but don't clickbait them because it's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, and I think we've all been caught by that. You know, we've seen this greatest revelation of all time, and you sit there for 10 or 15 minutes watching something, and you think, well, I still haven't heard the greatest revelation of all time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh, uh, Chris, our time, we're not out of time yet, but our time
Sure.
is running down.
Yeah.
If people want to get in touch with you, what are the best ways to do that?
Yeah, so obviously I'm on every social media platform. Obviously, I'm not active on all of them. Like I say, as a social media person, we tend to spend our time worrying about everyone else's social media, so we're not great at keeping up to our own. But they can find me at www.yoursparkmedia.com, which is
Okay.
YOURSPARKMEDIA. And my handle on all social media platforms is Your Spark Media, with the exception of Instagram, which is your_Spark Media. My Instagram platform is primarily where I teach people about all this information. So I provide videos with tips and tricks and honest information about how to do this better. And then Facebook is more of your standard business type platform, but I'm not so active on it anymore. But if they want to get in touch, yeah, if they look at my socials, they can find us, and they can email me at chat@yoursparkmedia.com.
Okay, and when we pull the podcast together, Chris, I'll put these links into the description as well. Um,
Great.
right, we've got about a minute left. Do you have a
Sure.
final message for people on the social media front?
Just do better. Do better. No, just you know, be human, be yourself, be authentic. I think authenticity is a really big thing on social media, and especially if you are a business. So what I would say is, if you're a business, don't be scared to be yourself. Don't try to be another business. You
Yeah,
know, if you're a local jeweler, you're not going to be Tiffany's. So don't try and be Tiffany's. Try and be the
right.
local jeweler. You know what I mean? Be yourself. Be authentic, because that's what people engage with.
Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed chatting to you, and I hope people have found this really interesting. Have a great weekend, Chris, and a great
Thank you.
Christmas when it comes. Many thanks,
And
and
to you.
we'll be back next week, everyone. Take care.